One day, Petra decided to investigate exactly where she had come from. She was adopted, but didn't know much of anything about her origins. Over the last several years, she had become curious about who her family of origin was and where they had come from. Once she was old enough, she decided to take matters into her own hands about learning about herself and her past. She went to the archives and collected all the documentation she could find. That's when she came across a photograph with a very remarkable detail. But that wasn't the only thing. She'd discovered a hidden family secret. There she was at the archives. She had arrived at the place where she would find the answers about all of her family's secrets. Suddenly, however, there was a someone behind her. Who was this person? And what were they doing there with her? Petra wondered what they wanted from her. How long had they been following her? Did they have anything to do with the family secret? She just wanted to discover what her family had kept hidden from her. But why was this whole thing so secretive? And who was the person who had suddenly appeared? But before we start our story, smash the like button, make sure to subscribe and hit the notifications bell so you won't miss any new stories. Petra is a 30-year-old semi-American woman. She has lived there all her life, but she knew she had heritage tracing back to Europe. However, the couple that adopted her were always somewhat vague about this, and Petra had never managed to get a straight answer. This led to her being very curious. So one day Petra was at a party where everyone was talking about where they had come from and their heritages. Petra told everyone that she'd come from Europe, but wasn't entirely sure where. No one teased her, but she could tell they were disappointed she didn't have a more concrete answer. So she decided to take action and research her origins. Petra made her way to the archives, which had records from her adoption. Previously, her parents hadn't wanted to tell her where all these records were kept, so Petra had to track down that information too. Once she got there, the archives weren't very special. However, this was where she discovered something worth mentioning. In the bundle of stuff from the archives, Petra found a photograph of her grandparents. Something about the photograph intrigued her. She studied the photo more closely and determined that her grandparents were of German descent. That was certainly somewhere to start. Then Petra discovered a special detail. Petra recognized the tie the man was wearing. Petra's adopted dad often wore the same exact tie. Petra initially considered that it might be a coincidence, but then determined that there was no way her grandfather and her adoptive father had the same exact tie. But this could not be a coincidence, and she would need to investigate. Petra went looking for her adoptive father's tie. She needed to know if it was the same tie or not. While she didn't want to think this was a coincidence, she didn't want to make assumptions either. She did not inform her adoptive father of what she was doing, however. Therefore, this search did not go entirely according to plan. Petra had the key to her adoptive parents' house. She chose a day to visit when her adoptive parents were normally always out running errands like grocery shopping and her adoptive mother getting her nails done. When she stepped inside what was supposed to be an empty house, Petra was shocked. Petra's adoptive parents, Mark and Leah, were home unexpectedly. Petra wouldn't have seen their car in their garage. Mark asked Petra what she had come to do. Petra, in fact, did not often visit unexpectedly. She usually announced it in advance. What Petra told them was quite remarkable. Petra told her adoptive parents that she thought she had left the charger for her phone there when she'd visited a couple of days earlier. She indicated that was why she hadn't called, because her phone had since died in the meantime. Why couldn't Petra just tell her adoptive parents she was coming to look at the tie? Why did Petra have to think of a lie on the spot? Because there was more to the story. Petra did not want to reveal her true intentions just in case there was something more than what she had already pieced together. See, the tie was not the only striking thing about the photograph. There was something written on the back. On the back of the photograph there was a note that said, "If you are reading this, then you have found the clue. You are on the right track." Petra's parents seemed none the wiser when she told them she was going to go check in Mark's office and the back bedroom since they hadn't already come across the charger. Of course, there was no charger to be found, but that wasn't the point. Petra just needed an excuse to get the tie. Petra found the tie in question and decided to sneak it home in her purse. With today's technology, a lot can be done. Petra scanned the tie with her phone and was able to track down what retail sold ties just like it. Remarkably, there were only online stores from Germany that sold it. That was enough information for Petra. This could not be a coincidence. Her adoptive father Mark had something to do with Petra's ancestry. She was sure of it. Petra could not let the issue go and decided she would need to investigate further. But she didn't have a next clue. After some thinking and determination, Petra decided to fly to Germany. She couldn't get the message on the back of the photo out of her head. There had to be something with the tie. Petra decided that it would be a good idea to delve into the archives in Germany as well. Maybe she could find out more about her grandparents. She knew enough German to get by and started researching. Little did she know that she was completely on the right track. Petra searched her own last name and was given a box of documents to peruse. She took it to one of the rooms the archives had for people to look and began searching through the box. She found more of the same of what she had seen before. But then suddenly something unexpected happened. Petra had figured she could stay there perusing as long as she wanted without interruption. She had signed the appropriate paperwork and provided the right documentation to prove she was a legitimate person. But then she was interrupted. She was tapped on the shoulders. Who was this? What was happening? Petra was anxious that she was doing something wrong. As it was, the person who tapped on her shoulders was an employee of the archives. The employee asked Petra to come with her. "I'll get straight to the point," the employee said to Petra. This box is pretty special. It came down to the fact that the employee herself occasionally checked the archives as a hobby. However, she had been surprised by a bill she had found in this very box. The employee had kept the letters separate just in case anyone perused the box. But Petra's last name had pinged on the employee's radar as being related to the box, so she gave the letter to Petra. The letter said, "You are on the right track. Ask the grocer down the street for spices from America, and he will help you further." Petra asked the employee if she knew anything about the letter, the photograph, or the rest of the contents in the box. The employee didn't know anything else, other than it looked rather odd and suspicious. The two came to an agreement that Petra would go to the grocery store to see what the next clue meant. Petra's search got crazier and crazier. When she got to the grocery store, she asked the grocer for American herbs. He then told her to come to the back of the store with him. Petra was a little nervous, but agreed. She followed him to the back of the store. What happened next was quite bizarre. The grocer became angry with Petra. In poor English, he told her she should have come much sooner and that it was now almost too late. However, she might be just in time. Petra was completely dumbfounded. In broken German, she asked him what was going on. But he didn't give her a straight answer. Instead, the grocer asked Petra to come with him. She agreed, and they drove 5 minutes south. Along the way, he asked her urgent questions about ignoring letters and phone calls. Petra had no idea what he was referring to. As they struggled to communicate, bits of information began falling into place. The grocer mentioned he had been trying to reach her for a year, sending several letters to the home where she lived with her adoptive parents. Petra remembered seeing a letter addressed to her a few months ago, but her adoptive father had dismissed it as junk mail and thrown it away. Now, Petra realized something was being hidden from her. The man in the photo she had found wore the same tie as her adoptive father, and her parents were keeping secrets. Before she could tell the grocer, they arrived at a small, modest house. Inside was a very sick man and a woman who looked like Petra. The woman rushed to hug Petra, saying, "There you are," finally. Petra had no idea who she was or why her presence was so urgent. Overwhelmed, Petra couldn't find her voice. Then someone entered the room. It was Mark, her adoptive father. His sudden appearance raised more questions. He told Petra not to help the sick man, claiming the man had abandoned her and now only needed her when it suited him. The grocer stepped in to explain. He was the brother of the sick man who urgently needed a kidney transplant. Petra was his last hope due to the long donor list. Petra was confused. She had simply wanted to learn more about her family history. Then came the truth. The woman was her older sister, and the sick man was her biological father. Mark had adopted Petra from them and had received the letters but chose to hide them. He believed her parents had abandoned her shortly after birth, placing her in an orphanage. But they had done so because of financial hardship, hoping to give Petra a better life. Despite the shock, Petra wanted to understand more. Her father explained that they had placed her in the orphanage out of love, not rejection. He now hoped to reconnect. Mark still doubted his intentions, believing he only reached out now due to his illness. But it turned out her sister had sent the letters, believing Petra would uncover the truth. Now, Petra had to decide whether to proceed with the transplant. She was torn. Mark had raised her, but he had also hidden her past. She asked about her biological mother, and what she learned stunned her. Her mother was Leah, Mark's current wife. Leah had opposed giving Petra up and later searched for her. When she learned Mark had adopted Petra, she reconnected with him, and a relationship grew. They chose not to tell Petra that Leah was her real mother, fearing it would affect her bond with Mark. After processing everything, Petra agreed to be tested as a donor. She matched. Despite Mark's objections, she chose to help save her biological father. The transplant was successful. Afterward, Petra returned to America but stayed in touch with her father and sister. She confronted Leah but reconciled. Mark and Leah still live together. Petra now speaks to her father regularly and looks forward to her sister's visit to America. All in all, a happy ending to a crazy story.